Good morning. Welcome one and all to the Carbondale Unitarian Fellowship, a member congregation of the Unitarian Universalist Association, sharing the good news of Unitarian Universalism with folks throughout the river region. Our good news message is love, freedom, unity, respect, and justice as the basis for religious. I'm Rob Gallegly. I've served many roles over the years here at the fellowship, but most importantly, for today, I am your Sunday services facilitator. We are a congregation of open minds and hearts, all ages, all colors, all genders, all abilities, all kinds of wealth, all kinds of love. If you're a newcomer this morning, I'd like to extend a special welcome to you. We're really glad that you're here today. Please introduce yourself in the chat found in the center bottom toolbar down there somewhere on your screen, or at our online coffee hour after the service. Now, I invite you to select a gallery view from the top right-hand corner of your screen so we can wave at each other, connecting congregation over space.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm Reverend Sarah Richards. I'm the minister here at Carbondale Unitarian Fellowship, and it's great to see you all here this morning. Some of us were involved in a trivia battle last night. I thought Rob was going to introduce himself as part of his team. I was on the dark side cookies, and I think we all won in that we all had a great time. And thanks to Tabitha Ayers. I didn't realize how much getting together like that and just playing a game and having fun could be healing. But I'm reflecting on that this morning because this is our last Sunday of the month. And so it's the last Sunday that we'll be together to contemplate our monthly theme, which is, what does it mean to be a people of healing? So it can take the form of participating in a silly trivia game and making connections via Zoom on a game. Obviously, it can be making connections on a Zoom in a Sunday service. But this morning, I really want us to dig deeper and go a bit wider and think about how we can be a people of healing when we're talking about systemic wounds, systemic illness of the historic oppressions of racism in this country. And these have been starkly revealed by the COVID pandemic. We're all affected by the virus, but we look at the data, we look at people's experiences, and we see that Black people, Latinx, Indigenous peoples, and others already marginalized by race and ethnicity are in fact the people who are suffering the most, not only from the virus itself, but also from the economic impacts of that virus. So how can we be a people of healing for this kind of embedded structural racism that has wounded our country and continues to do so? It's a big topic, but we can do it together. So let's get started. We begin every service by lighting our chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism.
Our reading this morning is Invocation by Reverend Angela Herrera. Don't leave your broken heart at the door. Bring it to the altar of life. Don't leave your anger behind. It has high standards, and the world needs vision. Bring them with you, and your joy, and your passion. Bring your loving, and your courage, and your conviction. Bring your need for healing, and your power to heal. There is work to do, and you have all that you need to do it right here in this room.
So I have lit the chalice, and now Rob, with intention, has selected a pebble and puts it in a bowl of water, letting it ripple out, that intention magnifying, rippling out beyond his space to all of us and beyond even our knowing. All of us are invited to do the same at home, whether you have a bowl of water or just a little dish that you want to put paper clips in to mark sorrows and joys, anything that you're feeling at any time during the service. And now I invite you to sing along with our first hymn, which is a familiar one, Meditation on Breathing. It has 3 parts, and you can choose just the drone to sing along, breathe in, breathe out, or you can sing the melody or the descant. It doesn't matter. All the words are on the screen. And please, this is a good time when I'm introducing meditation on breathing to be patient with all of us this morning with this technology. We've got a lot of sharing of screens and flipping back and forth, and we are without our expert, Amy Weber, this morning. So when there is a mistake that happens or a technical pause, please, I invite you to take that moment to just breathe deeply and relax into it. So here we have meditation on breathing.
Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out,
And now that we're breathing in and out, I invite you into a moment of meditation and prayer. This is called Prayer for Peace and Healing. It's by my colleague and friend, Marta Valentin. Spirit of life all around us, you have gathered us together in a swirl of healing wind. Take this newfound apprehension, an unwelcomed shawl heavy upon our shoulders, and make of it a comforter, soft and warm and trusting, in which we might rest our weary souls. Each day we awaken, may our first thought and vision be the peace in the eyes of our sisters, brothers, cousins, who also see the peace in mine. And from this gaze into each other, may the peace of our hearts heal one another. May it be so. And now is the time in our service that we bring both those unwelcomed feelings and happenings that are burdening us, that are heavy on our shoulders. And we also bring those joys and the gratitudes that comfort us. And we do that in fellowship so that our sorrows may be witnessed, our joys may be shared. And we begin with sorrows. I invite anyone who has a sorrow or a deep personal concern to unmute yourselves and share. We open our hearts to you. Jess, go ahead.
This is about my best friend and other nurses and doctors in hospitals all over right now. I got to talk to her on Thanksgiving. She had the day off, and this is her first year as a nurse and her first year working in an ICU. And she's not doing well. And what she's described is, she said it's a war hospital and that the patients aren't getting the care that they need because they can't. And I'm just really concerned about her and her colleagues all over the country and what this is doing to their spirits and to the profession of nursing, which is so important. And so I just ask that we lift my best friend Nicole up and all the other nurses and doctors and healthcare professionals that are just really struggling as the pandemic spikes yet again.
Let's take a moment, as Jess suggests, and open our heart to Nico and all of our healthcare workers right now. Amen. Are there any other, let me check, are there any other sorrows or personal concerns that someone would like to share? Dan Marsh. Go ahead, Dan.
I'm concerned about and have compassion for people in our community and people in the United States and all over the world who don't have enough food to eat, who are starving. It's hard for us to look at the news today, I know. I have many friends and relatives who tell me that they just can't look at the news because it hurts. And I know it hurts. But the thing is, I look at it anyway because I feel compassion for my sisters and brothers all over this world. And I think of that wonderful song about all over this world, you know. And I'm sending love out and compassion to all the people who are suffering in war zones and who don't have enough to eat I think we have the Sparrow Coalition here for the homeless. We have food banks. All the communities across our country are doing their best with their food banks. And I know that our communities are working very hard. And I just want to thank everyone who's working so hard during this pandemic to help those who are suffering. And it's like Jess said, people in the hospital. Last time I went to the hospital a month ago, I saw what pain that my doctors were under.
Mhm.
And I just couldn't help but love them and have compassion for them. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you so much, Jan. That's a great reminder of the need to send out compassion. Anyone else have a sorrow that they would like to share? Okay, again, you can also put something in chat. And I forgot to mention, those of you who are on the phone, because we can't see you, or if you have your screen turned off, please just unmute yourself and start talking. Don't feel shy if you have something that you'd like to share. Chris Lant, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a joy.
Okay, I'm just about to get to that.
Oh, I thought you were going there. I'm
No,
sorry.
yes, I'm trying. Let me now invite those who have a joy or gratitude that they would like to share. It's important to remember as we're sending out our compassion and feeling the burdens and losses. It's important also to send out joy and share those moments of gratitude. So, Chris, lead us.
I thought I figured out the sorrows and joys pattern. My joy is that my daughter Helen, and I following up on what Dan said, my daughter Helen has a job now running a food bank in Olympia, Washington, and she's working really hard. But it's a great job and very meaningful work. And I'm talking to her a lot about how things are going there, and they're meeting the need, and the people are lined up all day long. But they're meeting a lot of needs in Olympia, Washington.
Thank you, Chris. And thanks to Helen too, for all of her work.
I have a joy. My joy is that I had a really good time at the trivia night last night. And I got some of my babies to come on and be a team with me and my husband. And so that was so much fun. It was just fun to get to interact with them in a group like that. And I'm really missing them. And it was fun to hang out with everybody. And I realized I really need to step up my trash talk game. So next time I'm practicing, so beware. So.
Okay.
Candy?
Yes, I have my two youngest sons and my daughter-in-law and John and I were able to get together for Thanksgiving over at their house. And my daughter Nancy, who's still in the Navy and still long distance, was going to be alone on Thanksgiving because her husband's in Florida right now trying to solve some problems, custody problems with little daughters. And so Nancy and I arranged to do FaceTime with one another. And so we just had such a good time. We just kept passing the phone around from person to person and And Johnny and Hannah took her on a tour of their house, which she'd never seen in person because they got it, after COVID hit and Nancy couldn't visit. So we just had a great time, and I'm just still basking in the joy of that.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Candy. Anyone else have a joy or gratitude that they would like to share? Go ahead, Bob. Unmute yourself.
Karen and I got a Dear Grandma and Grandpa letter from our granddaughter Clementine and Orcas, and it was the most beautiful letter that we've received in a long, long time. Just beautiful. All in cursive.
Wow. It has not died out. That's wonderful. Go ahead, Jerry.
Yes, I'd like to. The joy that I have is that the fellowship delivered everybody just like the last several months, all pulled together and delivered that another Mastacholi dinner on Thanksgiving night. So we've been doing this since April now. So that's my joy, is that we were able as a fellowship to do this for the homeless population.
Thank you, Jerry. And I know because I talked to Carmelita this week. She said they were really looking forward to having the Mastacholi because they've been getting donations of turkey nonstop for like weeks and weeks. So the Mastacholi dinner was going to be a very welcome, even more welcome than usual meal. So thank you to all of the volunteers who made that happen. All right. For all of the losses, the concerns that were shared aloud, for all of those moments of joyful connection with loved ones and people we don't know personally, but nevertheless, every connection these days is certainly a welcome and expression of love, really, for all of those that were shared out loud, and for all of those feelings, the joys and sorrows that are so deep within our hearts, we can't express them in words. Let us meditate on all of these in a moment of silence.
Just as we share our sorrows and joys in fellowship, we share our financial resources with the congregation as our circumstances allow. During the pandemic, some folks are experiencing hardship. Others are relatively unaffected financially. We appreciate the generosity of spirit, time, effort, and money of all during these challenging times for the good works of the fellowship within the congregation and beyond. Your checks written to CUF 105 North Parish Lane, Carbondale, Illinois, 62901, are much appreciated. Or now you can donate online via PayPal. You can get all the details in the email announcement of the service or the weekly bulletin. And our recipient for Social Action Month of Sundays this month is the Women's Center. The Women's Center has benefited the community for many, many years. And I know there have been many people at the fellowship who have volunteered there to try to broaden the efforts as much as possible. For more information about the Women's Center and how you can contribute or make a donation, you can read about that in the bulletin or in the announcement that came out about this service.
Now please enjoy our offertory by the McDaniels.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day, the dark sacred night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people passing by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry. I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
Our reading this morning is a quote from poet and philosopher Bayo Okomolafe. One note about his name, though. Bayo means I have seen joy, and Okomolafe means one to teach people the good life. So he kind of joked saying there was no pressure growing up with a name like that. Anyway, here's the quote. Saying sorry is not enough. Reconciliation today is often framed in terms of ornate performances of contriteness. Australia even has a National Sorry Day to commemorate and reflect on the mistreatment of Indigenous peoples in that country. While this is no doubt important and powerful, seeking forgiveness is just a first step. Saying sorry is more likely to reinvest white power with the sort of moral nobility a philanthropist acquires for spreading his wealth. A deeper sort of accountability is needed, one that brings us to the edges of ourselves, one that helps us notice that we are a palimpsest of colors, and that who or what we are is always in the making. Forgiveness is settling debts. Reconciliation is troubling boundaries.
Saying sorry is not enough. A deeper sort of accountability is needed, one that brings us to the edges of ourselves. Last Sunday, during our Thanksgiving bread service, I mentioned that while most Americans gather for a feast on the holiday to give thanks, some indigenous peoples gather to mark a day of mourning. How can the descendants of genocide survivors be grateful on the day that celebrates the beginning of that genocide? I think that attitudes are shifting on celebrating Columbus Day, 500 years after Columbus's arrival in the New World, in quotes. Berkeley, California became the first city to recognize Indigenous Peoples Day. Now some 13 states and hundreds of cities celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day or Native American Day instead of Columbus Day, although that is still a federal holiday. The shift hasn't been uniformly welcome. Some Italian Americans have taken offense, but compromises are possible. 3 years ago, the Akron, Ohio City Council was split along race lines on the issue, and Italian Americans protested. And I'm quoting, in 2018, a compromise was reached with the City Council voting to name the first Monday of October as North American First Peoples Day, while keeping Columbus Day. And in 2020, Columbus Day was renamed Italian American Heritage and Culture Day. Thanksgiving, though, is a whole different butterball game, though. There is no movement to replace Thanksgiving with a national day of mourning, as far as I've been able to find. Mashpee Wampanoag Chief Kakamisik wrote to his people, "Historically, Thanksgiving represents our first encounter with the eventual erosion of our sovereignty, and there is nothing wrong with mourning that loss. As long as we don't wallow in regret and resentment, it's healthy to mourn. It is a necessary part of the healing process." That is a key point for us as we ponder what it means to be a people of healing. For Indigenous peoples, mourning their great losses is part of the healing process. Those of us who identify as Americans but not Indigenous people might well ask ourselves, what is our part in the healing process? It is much bigger than expressing regret for the stolen lands, the genocide of the past. What about the ongoing oppression of Native peoples revealed in continued high rates of poverty, unemployment, death, illness, and not to mention the higher death rates from COVID? Healing this systemic violence, which is part of white supremacy culture, demands actions, demands accountability. To truly repair the structurally embedded wounds of our society demands reparation. Now, perhaps you have read the growing literature discussing reparations to Black Americans. Perhaps you've heard of H.R. 40, the bill proposed by U.S. Representative John Conyers every year from 1989 until his death last year. The 40 in its name refers to the broken promise from the U.S. government of 40 acres and a mule for emancipated slaves after the Civil War. This bill, which has been proposed by U.S. Representative Sheila Jackson since Conyers' death, calls for the establishment of a commission to study and consider a national apology and proposal for reparations for the institution of slavery, its subsequent de jure and de facto racial and economic discrimination against African Americans, and the impact of these forces on living African Americans, to make recommendations to the Congress on appropriate remedies and for other purposes. Representative Jackson wrote in a recent essay, the reparations movement does not focus on payments to individuals, but to remedies that can be created in as many forms necessary to equitably address the many kinds of injuries sustained from chattel slavery and its continuing vestiges. To merely focus on finance is an empty gesture and betrays a lack of understanding of the depth of the unaddressed moral issues that continue to haunt this nation. So just as an apology alone is only part of the way to healing, adding money doesn't get to the accountability part, the repairing of the wounds part of our country. And for Black people, race-based oppression, of course, didn't end in 1865, just as Indigenous peoples suffer long after their forced removal and resettlement. Maybe you've heard or read Ta-Nehisi Coates' 2014 essay, The Case for Reparations. I highly recommend this article. It begins with the story of Clyde Ross, who grew up in Mississippi, the son of farmers forced into sharecropping. Denied a decent education, Ross nevertheless made his way to Chicago and was able to find a job that supported his family. Ross's dream was to own a house and provide for his kids' education in a way his parents couldn't. But as a Black man in 1961, buying a house in segregated Chicago, notorious for redlining, Clyde Ross had no other option than to buy on contract. As Coates describes it, the white men who peddled contracts would sell homes at inflated prices, then evict families who could not pay, taking their down payment and their monthly installations as profit, monthly installments as profit. Then they'd bring in another Black family, rinse and repeat. Clyde Ross became involved in the Contract Buyers League, which organized and protested the predatory contract system, and even sued the sellers, the contract sellers, for damages in 1968. The case dragged on for nearly a decade, with the League ultimately unsuccessful in their pursuit of justice. Coates observes, if there were any doubts about the mood of the jury, the foreman removed them by saying, when asked about the verdict, that he hoped it would help end, quote, the mess Earl Warren made with Brown v. Board of Education and all that nonsense. This is 1976. Coates traces the ever declining fortunes of Clyde Ross and those who lived in the Black neighborhoods of West and South Chicago. Declines that were intentional and reinforced by federal housing authority policies and practices. And as we all know, Chicago is no outlier. It's part of national trend. So I quote from his article. This is a little long, but it gives it in the impact in a relatively short amount of time. He says, Black families, regardless of income, are significantly less wealthy than white families. regardless of income. The Pew Research Center estimates that white households are worth roughly 20 times as much as Black households, and that whereas only 15% of whites have zero or negative wealth, more than a third of Blacks do. Effectively, the Black family in America is working without a safety net. When financial calamity strikes, a medical emergency, divorce, job loss, the fall is precipitous. And just as Black families of all incomes remain handicapped by a lack of wealth, so too do they remain handicapped by the restricted choice of neighborhood. Black people with upper middle class incomes do not generally live in upper middle class neighborhoods. One study shows that Black families making $100,000 typically live in the kinds of neighborhoods inhabited by white families making $30,000. Blacks and whites inhabit such different neighborhoods, the researcher writes, that it is not possible to compare the economic outcomes of Black and white children. They literally live in different worlds. So, does reparation all come back to money? To put it in a nutshell, there is much disagreement about form and substance of reparations, but of those who talk positively about the need to make reparations, money seems to be a critical and yet still insufficient solution. Some advocate paying awards to qualified individuals, descendants of enslaved people or former students of segregated schools, for example. Others advise a system of payments to various organizations. Others to programs like zero-interest mortgage loans, guaranteed contracts for Black-owned businesses, and free college tuition. These last are targeted at the systemic nature of US racism. Now, let's just get back to our initial question. What is our role as people of healing in the question of reparations for the devastating effects of racism, historic and current? First, of course, educating ourselves through reading, study, discussion. And yes, calling on our congressmen to co-sponsor and or support H.R. 40 is a good step. Over nearly 30 years, H.R. 40 hasn't yet made it out of committee for a vote. But every year, there's more discussion and we get closer and closer. And then I think this advocacy for H.R. 40 is still not sufficient. I remember Bayo Akomolafe's words, a deeper sort of accountability is needed, one that brings us to the edges of ourselves. We don't need to go as far as Congress or even Chicago to see the effects of embedded racism, of white supremacy culture. We see it in Carbondale, in Marion, in Heron, in Murfreesboro, all much smaller, but just as segregated, just as unequal, as inequitable in life chances. In all my reading on this topic, I was most intrigued to read a sermon given by my colleague, the Reverend Ashley Horan, at a United Church of Christ congregation in Minneapolis a few years ago. She preached from a passage, the book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah commands, "Deliver from the hands of the oppressor anyone who has been robbed." And I'm quoting her now, anyone, not everyone, but anyone. This tiny 3-syllable word reminds me that while I and you, this congregation, have very little power to radically shift the big picture, we each have the power to do what we can where we are with what we have. We each have the power to stop colluding with evil and start in 1,000 tiny ways healing this beautiful broken world. Reverend Horan went on to detail some of the 1,000 tiny ways the people of that Minneapolis congregation could make reparations. They could map their congregational assets, people, infrastructure, and money. Then they can partner with community organizations led by people of color to transfer those assets when they are needed. She gives some examples: a Black Lives Matter organization needing meeting place and supplies, an undocumented immigrant group planning to protest ICE raids needs a fiscal sponsor. Members of participating congregations commit to giving $1 a week to Black, Brown, Indigenous community organizers to stop evictions, provide bail for arrested protesters, to pay for their own office space rental. She asks, if just 10 or 20 or 100 congregations committed to radically sharing our resources, no strings attached, with the organizers and activists leading the charge for justice, what would become possible for our movements? And just as importantly, how would our own souls be transformed? Friends, I invite you right now, during the musical interlude, the coffee hour, in discussions with CUF folks, in community meetings and conversations with your families, your neighbors, city council persons, in your meditations and moments of prayer, to contemplate how you yourself, how we as a congregation may be a people of healing in our own communities. What 1,000 tiny ways would become possible for our congregation working with others? How might we be a people of healing and reparation? How might our own souls be transformed? Amen.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4. People get ready, there's a train a-coming. Don't need no baggage, you just get on board. All you need is faith to hear the diesel rumbling. Don't need no ticket, you just thank the Lord. People get ready for the train and journey.
Alrighty, just a few announcements before we're closing here. First of all, please make sure to read all the announcements in the email that was sent with this morning's order of service. Thanks to Amy Weber, Sunday services like this one are recorded and she posts them on the CUF YouTube channel. So if you need a little extra dose of community, just go to YouTube and type in Carbondale Unitarian Fellowship in the YouTube search bar. Now, let's thank our musicians, Dorothy and Kent McDaniel. And thanks to Jean Basanta and Rhonda Kosmicki, our co-hosts this morning. And thanks to all who were part of this service, which is each and all here together in online fellowship. Newcomers, we are ecstatic that you have joined us this morning. Please put any questions, comments, or contact information into the chat box, and we'll follow up with you. We hope you'll stay on for virtual coffee hour after the service so we can get to know each other. Now, I invite everyone to join in singing our final hymn, Fire of Commitment.
Into faces
I now ask or invite everyone to choose speaker view from the view menu in the top right corner of the screen, so you can get this dual benediction effect. I also invite you, if you're sitting or standing next to a person in your bubble, to clasp hands, and otherwise, if you're like me, by yourself, you're not alone. If you raise your palms to receive and give the benediction, I think you'll feel that we are connected. These words are by L.R. Knost. Do not be dismayed by the brokenness of the world. All things break, and all things can be mended.
Not with time, as they say, but with intention. So go, love intentionally, extravagantly, unconditionally.
The broken world waits in darkness for the light that is you. Amen. And now please join me in singing our sung benediction, Blessings of Love. Just a moment, I will have the lyrics on the screen. So please mute yourself. Everyone should mute yourself and then sing along with me. And even though I can't hear you, I know you're singing loudly with passion and joy. May the blessings of love rest upon you. May peace abide with you. May love's presence illuminate your heart now and forevermore. Go in peace with love for justice. And please don't go right away. Stay on for our coffee hour that will start in just a minute.